So by now you've been to a couple of sessions and heard what's new with Common Core and what the new shifts are, the new changes with Common Core. We're here to talk to you about two programs, Thinking Maps, which should probably look familiar to you with your students' work, and Right from the Beginning, a writing program aligned with this, that are already in place and have been in place for many years. So we do have a lot of wonderful programs and a lot of materials already in place with Common Core, so we're not throwing everything out and starting over. We already have a lot of these in place. So we're going to talk about these two programs and how they align with Common Core. So first, Carolyn will talk about the maps. I will talk to you about how they align, and then we'll transition to the writing component piece. And you heard in the ELA Shifts presentation how writing is very important in Common Core, to write in every single subject area. So these two programs will help our students to be able to do that successfully.
So this is page 4 in your handout if you don't want to have to read the blurry projection up here. These are the thinking maps that we've been using. Students and teachers are very familiar with them. We've been using them for like 10 years, so we know them. The idea behind thinking maps is that there are 8 that they did a bunch of brain-based research. And the idea was they wanted to identify key thinking skills that students needed in order to be successful. When they did that research, they identified 8 key thinking skills listed down the middle of your page there that were important for kids to be successful. To support students with those thinking skills, they wanted to associate a visual pattern with them. We know that more than half of the nerves that fire to our brain are sending visual signals. We're very visual thinkers. So instead of having comparing and contrasting being some abstract idea that just kind of exists up in our head, we wanted to have a visual pattern to associate with that. So every time a student is asked to compare and contrast, they would have their teacher would help them learn to use a double bubble map to do that. Whenever the teacher is doing sequencing in class, the teacher would model by using a flow map and teach the kids how they could use a flow map too to help them with that. We use all of these thinking skills starting in kindergarten. Kindergartners describe, they sequence, they compare and contrast. So we use thinking maps starting in kindergarten. We use thinking maps all the way up through 5th grade. And now our middle schools are using thinking maps also. The high school is aware of thinking maps. They don't explicitly teach thinking maps the same way we do at the elementary school, but the high school teachers know what thinking maps are. They're aware of the fact that the students are coming up to them with thinking maps as a tool for their learning. We use these thinking skills in all of the different subject areas. We classify in science, in math, in social studies, in reading, in writing. So we use the thinking maps in all of the different subject areas. And that's where the thinking maps become really powerful, because starting in kindergarten, all throughout their school day, these are tools that students can use to help them with any of the thinking that they run into. So Debbie's going to talk some about how these thinking maps that we've been using for years tie in and support the new Common Core state standards really well.
Okay, so on your paper that you have right there in your packet, it does have out to the side some examples of the Common Core standards that align specifically with each map and questions that are correlated with it. I apologize, it's kind of blurry, but this is the best we can do with this. I'm not going to read these to you because you have these to take home, but I did highlight a few standards. And like I said, this doesn't project as wide as we'd hope, so I'm going to have to kind of do a little typewriter type reading to you here. So in grade 3, one of the ELA standards says to compare and contrast the most important points and key details presented in 2 texts on the same topic. So when a teacher or the students see the words compare and contrast, it triggers in their head, oh, I know. One way I could organize my thinking, compare and contrast, is to use a double bubble map. So here's an example of a 3rd grade student who did just that. Where the 2 books are Balto and Stone Fox. They're both about dogs, so similar theme, similar text. And in the center, they wrote all the ways that they're the same, the comparisons, and in the red to the side is how they're different, the contrast. So now instead of having all these ideals just in my head swimming around, I have a visual way to organize them on paper. And now I'm ready to answer questions my teacher might ask me. I'm ready to maybe write a summary or some sort of writing prompt to go along with this, because now it's completely organized. In grade 7, one of their standards says to analyze the structure an author uses to organize a text, including how the major sections contribute to the whole and the development of the idea. So when I see the words analyze, sections or parts, and the word whole, that triggers parts to a whole, which would be a brace map. So this is a way teachers can even use thinking maps to organize their instruction. So this was a brace map done on genres of text. So it goes from the general to the more specific. Then here we're going vertically. We have literature, we have informational text, horizontally. We have fictional, poetry, drama, the different types, and we get a little more specific with the examples. So it goes from the general to the more specific here in a brace map, parts to a whole, and this would be the whole. In 11th grade, one of their standards says to cite strong and thorough textual evidence to support analysis of what the text says explicitly. So we chose one map. You could do this with every single map, but we chose a basic one that we're familiar with seeing is the bubble map. And the way you would do that is just to write out to the side the evidence the students found from the text, whether it's a word, a phrase, if it's a dialogue, and the page number as well. And here's an example from the book The Crucible, when there was a character analysis of Elizabeth. So the student wrote out to the side words about Elizabeth to describe her. But in addition, this is a girl, she had to put down how she came to that conclusion. And this teacher gave the directions that it could only be from dialogue, so it made it a little more challenging as an older student. So she wrote down all the specific quotes and the page number that led her to believe that Elizabeth was suspicious. And now her thinking is organized as well, and she cited her evidence from the text as well. Okay, so you're going to get the chance to do a thinking map yourselves. So if you turn to page 5 in your packet, there's a nice white space at the bottom. If you need a pen or a pencil, we have extras. So we're going to pick a topic that's easy for us all, something familiar, and it's going to be Arcadia. We'll be doing a bubble map as well, otherwise known as a describing map. So in the center of your paper, if you'll please write the word Arcadia, then circle it. And then we're going to give you like 30 seconds to write 2, 3, maybe more descriptors to describe Arcadia. However, here's the trick. With a bubble map, they may only be adjectives. That's the rule with the bubble map. So for instance, I could say Arcadia is beautiful, Arcadia is mountainous, but I cannot say has good restaurants because that's not an adjective. So think about just adjectives to describe Arcadia. You can work with the people sitting next to you. We let our students collaborate. You can as well. We'll have people share out some of your ideas. So take like 30 seconds and see if you can come up with adjectives that describe Arcadia. So somebody put safe. We've heard safe a lot in all the sessions we've had so far. Convenient, yes. Anything else? Anybody else want to share? We've heard expensive. Well, that's come out here. Okay. Yes. We've also heard safe, which is nice to hear, and clean. So was it more difficult to think only in terms of adjectives? Because that's kind of the point, that these maps might look very simple in their design and how they're laid out, but the thinking that goes into the maps is not so simple. And as our students get older, we combine maps and put maps within maps to continue to challenge them. So Carolyn's going to show you how we can take a basic thinking map and turn it into a piece of writing across the curriculum.
So we've been using the thinking maps for about 10 years, and just in the last few years, we started using the Right from the Beginning program also. The Right from the Beginning program is a writing program that was developed by the same people who developed thinking maps. And it basically uses thinking maps to help students brainstorm and organize for writing. So I'll kind of take you through the process real quick. If a student was given this prompt, tell about where you live, describe your city, and tell about some of the kinds of activities there are to do there, we're hoping that immediately a student would recognize that they're being asked to describe, and then they'll think, describe piece of cake. I've been using bubble maps to describe since I was in kindergarten, and so they could go ahead and use these descriptive words. Hopefully they'll also recognize that they're being asked to talk about different kinds of activities, and that could be done using a tree map, which is another very commonly used map. The idea of a tree map is we have Arcadia, we have the different types of activities, and then examples of those different types of activities down here. So if they can do those maps, then they've done the thinking that they need to do for their writing. But they need to get organized before they write. And the Right from the Beginning program gives us an organizational structure to do that. The idea is that students will write an introductory sentence to just introduce what they're talking about. And then depending on what the prompt is, they'll choose a good order of information to share. Here the student chose a couple of good descriptors from their bubble map since they were asked to describe, and a couple of their favorite activities from their tree map since they were asked to talk about types of activities. They brainstorm details about all of those things and have a closing sentence here. So we really get them to become comfortable with that structure. I want to show you a couple of student samples real quick. This is from a first grader from earlier this year who was asked to write about what do you do at school, what's your routine. So they made a circle map about school, came up with read, math, test, friend, play. This is what they do at school. They chose some of their best ideas, circled them, and then got those ideas organized for writing. They chose a good order to put their favorite ideas in. And in first grade, we're not asking them to write introductory and concluding sentences, but this student was ready to start using some transition words. Once they've done that thinking and organizing, it's easy to write the sentences. First I do math, next I read with my friend, last we do a test. As they continue on through first grade and through all the different grade levels, we keep adding on and adding on and adding on until we get to the kind of work that a fourth or fifth grader could do. This fourth grader was asked to write about, do you think students should have homework every night? Something's wrong with this student because he said yes. Without the teacher telling him what to do at all, he said, okay, first I've just got to get some ideas of why. He made a circle map, came up with a bunch of ideas why. No one told him to, but he, on his own, used this organizational structure to get ready to write. Came up with, because he's a fourth grader, a couple of sentences to introduce the topic, took some of his best ideas from the circle map, had details about it, came up with transition words, and then wrote his concluding sentences. From there, after he did the thinking and organizing, it was easy for him to turn that into a multiple paragraph piece of writing. So we went from 3 sentences up to paragraphs and paragraphs.